Gentlemen, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for this devotional. I love having you here, by the way. Today we're in Daniel chapter 6. I'm going to read verses 4 through 5. Before I do, let's remember where we are. So Daniel was previously enslaved in the Babylonian Empire, and then the Medo-Persians moved in with Darius in the lead. Now, Daniel, by this time, is like 80 years old. He's getting up there, fellas. But Daniel still has a gift, and his gift is so pronounced that he's still getting promoted. It's crazy. So I want to make a comparison here so you can see how powerful Daniel is, his current position. So in comparison to our country, we've got 94 district courts. Above that, we've got 13 appeal courts overseen by 9 Supreme Court justices and 1 Chief Justice. Now, in Daniel's situation, there are 120 of these district officials. They're governed by 3 high court officials, one of which is Daniel, who is, by the way, being considered for another promotion again. Now, this is a side note for those guys of you out there who are a little older. Guess what? You are not washed up. You might actually be at your best right now if you're still in the game. So get in the game. And you need to hear this. Just because you're pushing a walker or pulling an oxygen tank, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to get out of the game. Just find a way to stay in it, because I got to say this right now, Daniel's gifts are so pronounced. He's still getting respect from people. But as we're going to see, not everybody. So with this context in mind, here is our text for today. Verse 4 reads, "Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they couldn't find any ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error was ever found in him." So what we read here is that Daniel was a good guy. He didn't just have gifts. He was a great man of God. Then these men said this, quote, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel, because he's that good, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." So guys, this is an important note here. You need to hear this. Every government, every church, and every business has a known government, and then it has a shadow government, a shadow side. And you need to hear this. This is a fact. It's not some conspiracy. Because you see, heaven had one, and it was led by Satan. The garden had one, the first garden, and the serpent led it. And every government and church and business since has had one. And they exist because men, by nature, have strong, selfish desires. So we, that's all men, we'll manufacture ways to gain power and control. We'll do this, and we'll construct devious ways of going about this through these shadow alliances. And then we'll persuade others to join our side against an individual and intentionally create rules and regulations and laws that force others to do what we want. I hate to say this, but this is happening right now in our country, in your business, and even possibly in your church. So let's jump back to the context for a second. The Medo-Persian Empire operated a little differently from the Babylonian Empire. It was governed not just by a lone monarch, right? They were governed by known and established laws, a legal system. So these devious men, all 120 of them, planned to develop a law to set Daniel up. And they were going to put Daniel in a position where God's law competed with the Persian law, because they knew him to be one who would never break God's law. So fellas, we're going to get set up sometimes in this world, and we'll be pressured to obey a known law that infringes or competes with God's law. And sometimes the motivation behind this is going to be malicious. It's going to happen to you, and it's going to test your loyalty and thus your faith. And it's here we have to take a hard stand. There are some of you today who are going through this moment right now. You're in the middle of this test, and right now you're going through a moment in maybe your community or your business or your church, or potentially even your family that's like this. And today, you're struggling to know what to do, because obedience to God is maybe going to put your job in jeopardy, or it's going to put you at odds with people in your church, or it might even estrange you from people that you love. So let me encourage you right now. Trust God more than that shadow government. because government in the end is on God's shoulders, and no law will ever stand against the law of God. I love you guys. Stay in the game today. If you're older, stand for the law of God. Be righteous and holy. And with that, I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.